Good morning, everybody. So very, very interesting topic today. And this is one I probably should have done a video on a long time ago, to be honest with you, given how much I hear it, but it just hit me when I had this conversation the other day. So I was chatting with this woman, great woman. It was a very short conversation because we got to this very quickly, but it became very apparent very, very quickly that, she really wanted to be an archaeologist, right? Her family, her father had pressured her into doing other stuff and this and that and whatever. And I said, well, listen, who cares what they think? If this is what you want to do, if this is what you want to spend your life doing, then just go do it. And she cried for a little bit. She was like, it was really a really touching moment for her. And then she came back and she said, but I'm 50 years old. And I said, so? She goes, what do you mean so? I said, so, what is that? Why does that matter? And she stops and she goes, well, I mean, and then she goes into the thing about school and this and that and this and that and this and that. I said, listen, if this is what you want to do, are you planning to retire at 65? And she goes, no, I want to keep working. I want to keep doing what I love as long as I can. I said, okay, great. Well, if you're going to spend another 10 or 15 years working or longer, then you'll pay off the student debt in 10 or 15, like that's a lot of earning power, right? $50,000 a year times 15, that's like $750,000. I said, so just go do it. And she goes, you're right. Oh my God, you're right. And so it was a very touching conversation, but it smacked me upside the head because I realized this is something that I hear so often. It's something that people think so often, and I hadn't done a video on it yet. So I wanted to come to you guys and I wanted to talk about how old is too old? When does that make sense to say, hey, listen, I can't go pursue my purpose because I'm X number of years old. So let's dive into it a little bit because there are a couple different things associated with it. It turns out age is really just, it obscures a lot of things underneath. So there's a top layer and there's like a lot of things underneath that. So one of them is, I hear people say, oh, well, you got to break a lifetime of habits. But let me tell you, right? I don't care if you're 30 or if you're 70. Breaking out of your conception of reality and society and how everything works, right? And getting into a whole different mindset of seeing the world from possibility rather than survival, of living your purpose from a place of, hey, this is what I'm meant to do instead of, oh, this is what I have to do to earn money. I don't care how old you are, that's going to be a heck of a journey, right? And the difference, just because you had a couple more decades to cement some habits doesn't change that at all, right? I mean, maybe a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, it's a huge jump anyway. And the question is, do you want to make that jump or not, right? At the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? It's a very simple decision, right? Are you going to live your purpose and live from a place of freedom or not? And whether you're 30 or 70 doesn't change whether or not you're going to embark on that journey, right? I'm not sure what that comment is. So the second thing that people talk about is they talk about ageism. So this is a complicated subject because obviously, like, I'm much younger. That's it. I don't really care. I'm just going to go in and just tell you what I've seen, having worked with hundreds of people, right? And having had clients from their 20s to their 70s. Doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, no one cares about age itself. Age is just a number. Right. And before you say, oh, well, that's not true, whatever, let me ask you, in the last presidential election, did you care how old either of the candidates were? Willing to bet no. What about the election before that in 2012? Did age make a difference for you? No. Nobody really cares about age, right? They think about these other things associated with age, right? Age itself is completely irrelevant, right? I very few people say, oh, well, so-and-so, unless they say it's connected to one of these other things, like they're not capable of doing the job because they're very old or something like that. So let's dive into those other things that are associated with age. So first off is, before we do that, if you're doing your resumes the right way, nobody should know how old you are, right? You don't put your birthday, you don't put your age on your resume. If you're doing it correctly, you don't list every job you've ever had. You only list like the recent relevant ones. So really, like, a 35-year-old and a 65-year-old can have a resume that basically, like, you can't tell the difference. So really it's about the interview, right? And so when people go in there, there are a couple things that they can think of, right, that can be tied to age, but aren't really about age itself. So one of the biggest ones is, health and energy, right? So if they're afraid that, you're not going to be healthy and you're not going to be like reliably able to be there, right, then that's going to affect the decision. But that would also affect the decision if you have a 30-year-old with a health condition, right? At the end of the day, like, people want to know that you're going to be there. Likewise, if you're 63 and they think you're going to retire at 65, right, then they're going to say, hey, listen, there's no growth potential. There's no steadiness. This person's only going to be here for a while. We want to hire someone, because training is expensive, right? Training somebody is expensive in time and money, and they want to see that pay off in the long run. But that would be the same thing for a 20-year-old kid who is getting a summer job, right? They want to see somebody who's going to be there for a while, right? But I think probably the biggest one is energy. So, there's kind of this energy of, oh, well, beaten down by the world, low energy, kind of grumpy, and the weight of the world on my shoulders. And that nobody wants to hire that person. It doesn't matter whether you're, 25 or 65, nobody wants to hire somebody who has that low energy, because it's not conducive to a good office environment. It brings the vibe down, right? The vibe that you show up with, right? Whether you're a high energy, enthusiastic, go-getter person, right, has a huge impact. And I don't know whether that kind of low energy, beaten down vibe is more frequent amongst older people or younger people, whatever. I do know that every single phone call I've ever had where people have talked about ageism, that kind of, the world's been tough to me thing has been there, right? So I know people who are in their 70s who have more energy than people who are in their 20s, right? Those people, if they walk into an interview, nobody's going to worry about their age, right? Nobody's going to care, because who they are far outshines any possible pattern associations that might be there. So that's ageism, which I've heard a couple times. But now let's talk about like what's really going on with your health and your energy, right? Because maybe, somebody else isn't judging you on it, but maybe you feel, hey, listen, I'm not healthy enough to do this, or I don't have the energy to do this. And here's the truth, right? How you carry yourself and how you live, whether you're living with enthusiasm and purpose and gratitude versus whether you're living in a mentality of survival, is going to affect your energy and your health drastically, right? As I said, like, I know somebody who's 70 who moves and acts like they're 20 and they look like they're 45, right? It's a samurai, actually. He trained way back when, right? Because he doesn't live in that space of, oh, things are tough, right? He lives in that space of, I'm doing what I love. I have a purpose, I have a mission, right? And that kind of thing is really, 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 really powerful. So that spikes your energy, right? So if you don't have energy, that's the problem. That's not the obstacle, right? This is the symptom, not the cause. And it's the same thing for health. If you're in that space of high energy, right, then that's going to affect your health. I could go into the cortisol pathways or adrenal fatigue or chronic inflammation or any of these other things. But if you're in a state of stress, then it's going to give you health problems. If you're out of a state of stress, your body at any age has a lot of rejuvenation capacities. I mean, look, you see people like Warren Buffett, he's still going strong. He's what, like 80s or 90s or something, right? And he doesn't let any of that get to him. And you can be the same way if you're living your purpose. So we've kind of talked about a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, right, that's what it comes down to, right? And yes, there are going to be exceptions, right? If somebody says, oh, well, I want to be an NBA superstar and I'm 63. Okay, well, listen, if your purpose was to be an NBA superstar, you wouldn't be figuring out now at age 63. Like, that's the truth, right? So like, if that was your purpose, you would have lived that. You wouldn't have, gotten past the point. So let's give a final answer to that question, right? How old is too old? I promised to answer that question, and I'm going to give it. And it's not about a number. You're too old when you're ready to die. When you've decided that this is the last chapter in the book, and you're just going to go on to the next story, that's too old, right? That's when you've called it a wrap, right? Until that point, if you still have something to live for, if you're like, hey, listen, I'm still going to be around, I want to find something to do, and you've still got that energy, then you might as well spend it doing something you love, right? as I said, I've worked with a lot of people from, in their 20s to in their 70s. And I can tell you, right, that it doesn't matter. Like, if you've got X number of years left, right, let's say you're 63 and you haven't done what you love yet, right? Let's say you say, okay, I've probably only got 20 more years, right? Well, that's all the more reason why you should be doing what you love, right? If you haven't done it yet and you've only got 20 more years left, that's exactly why you need to double down and make this happen. So unless you're at the end of the road, unless you've said, hey, listen, I'm ready to die, I'm ready to check out, which frankly, very few people are, then you've still got a reason to be here and you ought to start following your purpose. You got to figure it out, go do it. And I promise you, those last 20 years will be the happiest years of your life. It really will. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know that this is a controversial subject, but hopefully this was enlightening. And if you are at that point where you say, hey, listen, you're right. It's time for me to go live my purpose. Doesn't matter how old I am. I've got some fire in me and I've got a reason to go. And you want to talk to me about that? You want to talk about how to make that happen? Then go to this link. It's www.oculusinstitute.com/scheduling. I look forward to speaking to you guys and we will talk soon. Farewell.